This is ContraZoom, where we go back and forth about film. I'm your host, Dakota Arsenault. My birthday just passed, and because I'm so conceited, I like to make an entire episode dedicated to me. So for the 5th year in a row, I am doing an episode to celebrate myself. In 2020, for my 30th birthday, I named my favorite movie from each year that I'd been alive. In 2021, I named my favorite film per decade from the 1920s to the 2010s. In 2022, I named my favorite films across 10 different genres. And in 2023, I named my favorite films by language. Joining me this year for a third time is Bil Antoniou, the host of the Bad Gay Movies podcast, as we'll be doing part 2 of the best films by genre list. Bill was last heard on a Better Know a Contributor episode back in September last year. Welcome back to the show, Bill. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on this show.
Excellent. I'm always happy to hear that. You're always one of my favorite guests, and I always get feedback that you're a great guest to have on too. We have such a great repartee that you have to keep it going.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks to all the listeners who say that. I'm delighted and surprised. I think of myself as being rather unwelcome, but I'm glad if other people like having me on the show.
Now, you missed last year's birthday show because you were off gallivanting in Greece, so I debated not having you back this year after that snub, but I couldn't actually do that.
But then you remembered that I'm almost 50 and living with my mother, and you decided I needed the pity. Yeah.
This is more for you than for me.
I have to be someone's birthday treat, and if it has to be you, then I guess that's just what I have to settle for at this point in my life.
I'm glad that this is how we managed to work this arrangement out.
I won't tell you who my annual birthday treat is because I don't think they're fit to have on a podcast, but, we've all got something.
Yes, I know you love Woody Allen.
No, it's worse than that. Anyway, go on.
So as I mentioned earlier, this is actually part 2 of the best films by genre. I didn't plan it that way, but this is how it's working out. If you haven't listened to part 1 on episode 199, we named our favorite comedy, crime, musical, documentary, animated, sci-fi, horror, romance, action, and biopic movies. I will link to all the birthday specials in the show notes as well. But today we are naming our favorite films in the following genres: comic book, epic, family/kids, fantasy, live performance, silent, sports, thriller, war, and western. I know that's a lot to take in right now. We are going to go over each one individually, so don't worry about trying to memorize all of that. But we will be naming our top pick and a runner-up as well. But before we get into the picks, I just want to know, was there any sort of a process you went making your list, or is it just, first movie that came to your mind, that was your pick?
I did my best to do first movie that came to my mind, but my mind is a real jumble of things these days, and it's hard for anything to come to my mind. I also made a list of everything that we had already discussed in previous episodes because I didn't want to double up. So in some cases, I might not have actually chosen what would be my favorite in this category, but if my favorite is something we've already talked about at length, then it was worth picking something else to sort of expand the repertoire. But there was a lot of clicking on genres on Letterboxd and finding out what I'd given 5 stars to in the past, because I don't know, my mind is the result of, I don't know, electroshock therapy at this point that I don't remember, because it's not easy for me to just remember things off the top of my head anymore.
Fair enough. I'm very similar. I approach my list in an almost identical way because this is now the 5th time I've been doing this. There is quite a bit of overlap, so I had to sometimes bring in my runner-up or my runner-up to be my top pick, just for the sake of keeping it interesting, as you were sort of talking about there. So there are a few that my top pick is not actually my top pick, but I will point out the reason why when I get to that. So for the most part, I made that my runner-up.
Yeah, unless there are listeners tuning in because they want to hear me talking about Tokyo Story one more time, in which case I'm sorry to disappoint them, but otherwise, hopefully it works out well for us to spread things out.
You say that like I wouldn't absolutely listen to that podcast every time, Bill.
Well, I'm happy to talk about Tokyo Story as much as possible. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not too sure how you'd be able to shoehorn that one into one of the categories today. Maybe it's the best sports movie. I don't know, or the best western.
You could call it an epic. You could say it was. You could find ways to call it an epic. Epic is probably one of the more elastic category names in
It
this.
is, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well then I say let's jump right into this. We are going in
Great.
alphabetical order by genre, so the ones that I mentioned, that's how it's going to go. And I feel like this is going to be the last time we do a best films by genre because Bill and I had much back and forth about trying to decide on the genres because I kept messing up about repeating ones from the previous
Yeah,
year.
they're gonna become nano genres the next time you do. Like best film where the star has glasses and a unsurmountable problem or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so the first one is going to be a comic book. And so
Mhm.
this just has to be some sort of an adaptation from a comic book, graphic novel, things like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be your favorite Marvel movie. It could be anything that was made from a comic book to a movie. And I'm sure you're going to have some interesting picks. So I'd love to hear what yours were there, Bill.
Sure. This was the hardest one for me only because nothing was coming to mind except Ghost World, which I do really like. But I was just like, surely there are more. And I can't imagine picking like a Marvel movie because it's rare that I love those. So I actually had to do the old Google like movies based on graphic novels slash comic books to remember that there are quite a few that I do love and that I was aware were based on graphic novels. In one case, one that I've read. My runner-up would be James McTeague's V for Vendetta, which is a film that I remember really, really enjoying, even though its allegory of its fear for the rise of the return of fascism is not exactly subtle, but that's kind of its enjoyment. And it's a movie that I recommend. I find it really good. But my number one pick would have to be one of the most moving films I've ever seen, which is Vincent Perronneau and Marjane Satrapi's film of her book, Persepolis, which I thought was a brilliant, brilliant masterpiece that had me weeping in the movie theater. And yeah.
I'm not surprised that you picked Persepolis. I was wondering if that was going to be one of your options there.
Mhm.
That seemed like a good Bill pick.
Yeah, I'm not really keyed into animation as a genre. It's rare that I get excited by it, and I'm always still surprised when I love a movie as much as I do this one. I kind of go into them. I'm not against not like I'm not dragged into them, but I don't know. For some reason it's just not something that I rush to watch, and then I watch something like this and I'm like, why am I not more open to this sort of thing given that I love it and that I take it in as just as drama. Like Persepolis is not a movie that feels less humane to me just because it's animated drawings. And it's particularly worth watching in the original French because I love the actors that it involves.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in a similar boat for you where, you know, animation isn't my go to medium, but when I find the ones that I love, I really do love them.
Hmm.
Okay, well, I will go with my picks, and my runner up is going to be Road to Perdition, I'm blanking on the director, Sam Mendes film.
Hmm.
Uh, I really like that one, but that made my 30 films in 30 years list, so I cannot make that as my top pick. But
Hmm.
it's a great Tom Hanks movie where he kind of plays a bit of a villain, so if you're not as familiar with it, definitely check it out. And I believe it's the last role for Paul Newman that he ever did, if I'm remembering correctly.
It might be his last feature film. If it's not, it's very close. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was in that TV miniseries of Empire Falls after that, which I believe was the last thing he did, or the last major thing he did.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But my actual pick is we have a little bit of an overlap here. It's V for Vendetta.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was a movie where I watched it when it came out, and I remember liking it, and I feel like my memory of it got hazy because it became such a kind of a cultural touch point, in terms of the mask and the saying and all that sort of stuff. And so I gave it a rewatch just last year, I believe, and I was like, no, this is actually a really great film. Yes, it is very heavy-handed in its allegory, like you cannot mistake it at all, but for the most part, like it's still a very solid script. The action is excellent
Hmm.
and features a great performances from both Hugo Weaving, who you only hear him, and Natalie Portman.
Yeah, and I also feel that its heavy-handedness is excusable because it does call itself on it. I think the fact that it so openly references George Orwell's 1984 is its way of saying, "I know you know what this is about,
Hmm.
and I don't care." Like it's not a movie that's trying to pull one on you, and so I appreciate that, and I think its visual scheme is just gorgeous, and yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe one of the best things that the Wachowskis have written. Um, I don't consider them to be the strongest of writers. They are very visual directors, but this is probably one of the best things they've written, and maybe that's because
Yeah,
it's
I
based on
would
the
agree.
Alan
I
Moore.
haven't
So
liked anything they've done since the first Matrix, so yeah.
yeah, that's not incorrect opinion to have. I feel very similar to that too.
And I think this is also the best Alan Moore adaptation as well, right? Because he's the Watchmen, and he's
Hmm.
also, is he League of Extraordinary Gentlemen as
I
well?
believe he was, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
I don't really have much patience for him and his whole like I cash the checks and Hollywood is hilarious kind of thing. I find him a bit insufferable, but he does write good material.
yes, yeah. I do like The Watchmen, the movie. It's fun at times, and I think it's probably Zack Snyder at his best, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But that's saying,
I didn't find it fun. I found that movie as someone especially who's not really like involved deeply in that world. I remember sitting in the theater feeling like I'd walked into the middle of a movie or something where no one was answering my questions. I found that movie a bit confusing.
yeah,
And yeah, I didn't have a good time with it. I didn't really think that it justified its mammoth length, but I also didn't hate it. I was just sort of indifferent to it.
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next genre is going to be epic, and as you sort of alluded to, it is probably the most elastic genre where it's one of those things where you know it when you see it,
Yep.
and just because you can describe it, that doesn't mean that all movies that fit the description are also epics as well. So it really is sort of a title that has to be bestowed upon a film rather than this is the genre that it is.
Yep.
So what were your picks for best epic film?
Well, I tried to keep it to, movies of mammoth length and, mammoth size, not like size in scope, is what the word I'm looking for. My runner up would be Nuri Bilge Ceylan's Once Upon a Time in Anatolia from 2011. This is my favorite of all his films. It is a group of men driving all the way across Turkey looking for a dead body, and then we as an audience sort of get a glimpse into their souls. It's a absolutely marvelous, marvelous film that ridiculously did not win the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival that year. But my number one pick is a more traditional choice of an epic. I know everyone hates it. I know everyone's always hated it. I love it. I can never get enough of it, which is Joseph L. Mankiewicz's 4-hour Cleopatra from 1963, starring Elizabeth Taylor in more eyeliner than you can shake a stick at. And of all those really big, junky Hollywood on the Tiber epics that were made in the 50s and 60s, Cleopatra is the one that looks the richest. You can really see the money on screen. I love the sets and costumes. I really do feel like you go somewhere. And I kind of love that it's a bit too long and a bit boring. There's something so, I don't know. I guess I love a big swing even when it is a big miss in this case. And I find it so juicy and incredible. It's just incredible.
Cleopatra is a movie I've always wanted to watch, and the running time is the thing that's always sort of stopped me from just being like, oh yeah, let's just throw on Cleopatra. Oh, it's this long? Oh, never mind.
I mean, understandably, and I have watched it numerous times, and who knows how many better things I could have done with my life with all of those hours. I've even seen it on the big screen, which was incredible. But it is really two movies in one, so you can split it up. You can watch one day and watch another the other day, and it won't ruin the experience for you.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Is Liz Taylor, not Liz Hurley, Liz Taylor, the original drag queen?
Oh no, I would not say that.
No?
You could count silent film actresses as the original, like Theda Bara and people,
Yeah, I
like
guess.
you can go further back for that. But Elizabeth Taylor certainly is, a key moment in drag history. That's for
Hmm.
sure.
Yeah.
But
She
yeah,
is absolutely stunning in that film. Like, every time I see an
yeah,
image from it, I'm just like, this woman is the most beautiful woman ever.
yeah, and it's not just beauty. Elizabeth Taylor had a real presence on screen. The fact that The fact that she'd started her career so young meant that she knew exactly how to be in front of a camera because, of course, when she was 8 years old and she had directors screaming at her to not blink, that taught her a lot because there were no child labor laws and she had no choice but to become an adult professional at a very young age. And despite the fact that it led to many other difficulties in her life, it did serve her well in terms of her career because there is something really impressive about her when you see her on screen in that film. And it's not just the beauty; it's there's a willpower that comes across.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So for my picks, I feel like maybe mine are a little bit boring, but I'll see what you think of them, Bill. My runner
It's
up.
hard to be creative with this category, though, so I'm sure they're
It
not that bad.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my runner up would be Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood.
Hmm.
Basically, the fact that it tells the whole scope of American greed from, the opening 20 minutes are completely silent to the very bombastic ending where, Daniel Day-Lewis is beating Paul Dano to death with a bowling pin is just epic in scale and looks, and I love that movie. It's a fantastic film. But my actual pick is also probably even less original, and that's Lawrence of Arabia, the David Lean film. If you ask 20 people name an epic, Lawrence of Arabia is probably going to be the first movie that they think of for most people. I just love the look of this movie. Uh, the way that he shoots the desert sequences are just so beautiful and stunning, and having Peter O'Toole's baby blue eyes pop on screen definitely doesn't hurt.
As Noel Coward said, if you were any prettier, they would have had to call it Florence of Arabia. Uh, No, I think it's a perfectly respectable choice. It is a familiar one, as you point out, but that doesn't. Listen, I have in my mind those 4 or 5 movies that quote unquote everyone says are so great that you watch and you're like, oh, it actually is great. Like Casablanca and Lawrence of Arabia is another one, and I had it very, very. I was very close to picking it for my choice, but I decided to be a little bit more outrageous, particularly because I'm just that much more likely to reach for Cleopatra as a rewatch than I am Lawrence of Arabia, which is, a real marvel of a film, given that, first of all, there's no women in it. So for some reason, I'm interested anyway. And it's just political dialogue for 4 hours. And yet it's so fascinating. And I think that one of the things that he does, that David Lean does so smartly in that film, is that he creates Lawrence and Omar Sharif's character as kind of a married couple. They fight like a married couple in that film.
Mm-hmm.
It's also his way of including the fact that T.E. Lawrence, by all accounts, was gay, and he can't really say it outright. And originally, audiences would not have seen that sequence where he gets raped in the Turkish prison because it was edited at the time. So that's partly why too. But they have sort of a passionate romance because you need something like that in this film, which is just men in sheets yelling at each other. Um, and then there is something incredible about the images and the cinematography, and unlike anything that had ever been seen before. And when you watch it now, it still feels like something that you've never seen before. It's a real really, really magical movie. Also one that I had the opportunity to see on a big screen once, and it took all day, but it was worth it.
Yeah, there's a handful of movies where my goal in life is to eventually be able to see it in a theater, and
Yeah.
Lawrence of Arabia is one of them.
Yeah, and I think that it's becoming less of a familiar option for film lovers as we go along. So it is good to keep mentioning it and stuff like that. Especially now that we're all watching movies on our laptops and stuff like that. It's good to remind people that movies are supposed to be big.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Okay, now the next category, I am very curious to hear about what
Hmm.
your picks are. So this is the family slash kids. So something that's either G rated,
Yeah.
or you can get the whole family around. That it's not going to be too racy, things like that.
Mhm.
I know it's also a bit of a nebulous genre itself, but what are your picks for family slash kids film?
Well, they're not too creative. My runner-up would have to be Mary Poppins. This is a film that I loved as a little kid, and then kept enjoying over the years, and then my niece really loved it, so I would show it to her, and I find that it's still just as fresh and wonderful as it was back then. And then, of course, having seen Saving Mr. Banks and reading a biography of P.L. Travers, it's also fascinating to find out the world that it comes from and the sort of the mess that it was born from. But I think it is an incredible film. But my number one choice has to be the all-time classic film that I always call the "It's a Wonderful Life for Gay People," which is Meet Me in St. Louis, because it is the film that I watch every Christmas. Also with my niece. The one year we didn't was the year that we got locked down with COVID. So sorry, everyone, for cursing you. And is this incredibly, seemingly wholesome, but actually quite interesting, creative, somewhat outsized portrayal of this family over the course of a year and all of their goings on, focused mainly around the younger daughter, or the second daughter of like five kids, played by Judy Garland in what is probably her most iconic role after The Wizard of Oz, as the girl who loves the boy next door.
Yeah, that's a movie I also have not seen,
Oh,
and
wow.
is high on my list of, if I ever start doing a musical deep dive, Meet Me in St. Louis would be near the top of that list.
Oh yeah, I hope you like it. It's not the first Vincent Minnelli movie, but it's certainly the first Vincent Minnelli movie that is like a Vincent Minnelli movie. You know,
Hmm.
where so many of the things that people love and admire about him are present. And also just like it's got, you know, the sassy little girl, like little sister played by Margaret O'Brien, and you know, there's a lot of things that queer audiences have read into the film about how it upends this wholesome portrayal of this heteronormative middle class family. But even if you just appreciate it on its surface merits, I think it's a beautiful film, and the musical score is great, including the fact that "How to Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas" became a standard after that film, and we all know about "Clang Clang Clang Went the Trolley." Yeah, I think it's an incredible film, and also given the fact that it is shot around the time that Judy Garland's personal problems really do become something to deal with on a film set, none of that struggle shows on screen.
Nice, that's good to hear.
Yeah,
And then Mary Poppins obviously is a classic.
of course.
I
Yeah,
don't know what child didn't grow up watching that one as well.
yeah. And also another one that you know, everything that was amazing about it in 1964 still feels amazing.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
still don't
still
know how she
breathtaking.
pulls a lamppost out of a bag, and I don't want to know.
Very true. Okay, so for my picks, my runner-up film is the 2011 Martin Scorsese film Hugo, which
Mm.
I feel often gets overlooked for its impressive use of 3D. Probably the best use of 3D I've ever seen in a film.
Oh.
Saw that in theaters, and not realizing halfway through that this was Scorsese's love letter to the creation of cinema was
Hmm.
a wonderful surprise for me. The fact that halfway through, Georges Méliès becomes a main character in this story about this young boy who lives in a French train station.
Hmm.
It was a great surprise.
Yeah, that's a lovely movie. I only saw it that one time in the theater, and I should probably watch it again because it wasn't like a favorite of mine, but it definitely has moments that I like, and it has a wonderful performance by the late great Helen McCrory, who never became a leading lady in the movies, but gave a lot of really memorable, indelible performances in films that are worth cherishing now that she's gone.
Yeah, this has a very stacked cast, which you expect
Hmm.
from a Scorsese film, but featuring none of his regulars,
Yeah.
which is nice to see.
Yeah. I have to say, I was hearing you say Martin Scorsese in the family category. I was like, where is he going with this?
Hmm.
His choice is
uh,
Casino.
what kid does not love Casino? Look at all those
Listen, it
gorgeous
involves a
dresses.
family, you know.
But my actual pick is the Jon Favreau film Elf. I am not a Christmas fan for the most part. Like the holiday is fine, but Christmas movies and music just drive me up the wall. And for years, this was the only Christmas movie I would tolerate watching with my family because every time I watched it, I would still laugh at it.
Yeah.
So it is one of the very few Christmas movies. I'm sick of it now because I've watched it so many times, but it's still so funny and some really wonderful comedic performances by everyone involved.
Yeah, I can maybe remember movies that made me laugh so hard I was tired in the theater like five times, and that's definitely one of them. It is really, really funny. I never thought of it as a family movie though. Is it not R rated?
No, it's G rated.
Oh, okay. I guess
Are
I'm
you confusing
remembering
it with
dirtier
Bad Santa
jokes.
or something?
I might no, I know the difference between those two, but I don't know. I guess I never thought of Elf as a kids movie, but it came out when I was like 26 or something, so I wasn't really thinking about that. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the next category that we have is fantasy,
Mm,
which also a bit like epic is sometimes a bit difficult to describe. Where obviously there's going to be maybe some sort of magic,
yeah.
medieval times sort of feel to it, but that isn't always the case. Sometimes it could be a little bit hard to pinpoint exactly, but kind of like epic, when you see it, you know it.
Yeah, I mean, if you attended a seminar on this at some kind of like fantasy and horror novels convention, you would find people talking for hours about what they think the distinction is. And of course, it's up to everyone to decide for themselves. For me, science fiction is when it involves technology, and fantasy is when it involves unexplained technology, like magic, basically.
Hmm.
So that's in my mind where I divide the line. But yeah.
That's a good way to sort of describe it.
Mhm.
So, what were your picks then?
Well, I'm going to drive everyone crazy because I am probably really pushing the limits of the definition of the genre. But my runner up would have to be Peggy Sue Got Married, which is a film in which a woman in her 40s passes out at her high school reunion and finds and wakes up in the world of her 16-year-old life, basically. But she's her present age, but living her last year of high school again. It was described as Back to the Future for adults when it came out. It's a lot more than that. It's a really, really deeply felt movie about nostalgia where Kathleen Turner gives the role of like, the performance of a lifetime, and is a movie that I've seen many, many times and I love. My number one choice is probably also going to drive everyone crazy, but I had to get it in there, and it is The Double Life of Veronique by Krzysztof Kieslowski, in which the same woman is born twice in two different countries. They somewhat interact. One sort of compensates for maybe mistakes is the wrong word, but sort of the flaws of the other, and is the best example of Kieslowski's ability to just put magic on the screen, sort of unexplained coincidences, and finding the sort of twilight world between cold hard reality and dream, and finding that middle ground and putting it on the screen in this way that is so deeply enchanting and just incredible. It's a perfect movie that I've watched many times and I will never get sick of. I love that film so much.
You've got two picks that I have not seen either of,
Oh
so
wow. What have you seen,
kudos.
Dakota? Jesus H Christ.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with both of them, but I have not seen either of these films.
Well, Peggy Sue is a movie that people scrunch their nose up at me when I tell them how much I love it. So I guess that's just a me thing. But Double Life is essential. You definitely have to get around to that one.
Yeah, I haven't seen any Kieslowski's, so that's definitely a me problem.
Yeah, he died young, so you don't have too much to catch up on. But
Yeah.
he's wonderful. He's really, really wonderful.
Should I start with something like Decalogue or The Three Colors or Double Life of Veronique?
You
Which
should
one would you
start with the
suggest?
one that's at hand, basically. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't. When I'm going through a director's filmography that I'm not familiar with, I try to go chronologically. But even then, whatever you can find. I've actually only seen like two of the Decalogues. I've still never seen all of them. I like the Three Colors movies, but I like Red the most, and I've watched that one 100 billion times. I've watched the other ones like twice. So yeah,
Okay, fair enough.
yeah.
So for my picks, the first one that I'm going to go with is the Guillermo del Toro film Pan's Labyrinth. You
Uh-huh.
can basically name almost any Guillermo del Toro film because they're all fantasy-like. But this I thought was a true masterpiece from him, taking this, childhood fairy tale story, but placing on the backdrop of the Spanish Civil War. And horror is often, the next level of fantasy, and this definitely leans into the horror a little bit, especially with the brutalities of war, but definitely one of my favorite films of all time as well.
Oh, well.
And then my actual pick would be the David Lowery film, The Green Knight, from a couple years ago, where I thought it was just such a bold take on a medieval round table story, and the way it's presented to us, and the magic that's involved in this film is just so stunning to watch, where just about every sequence in this film, you're left sort of breathless by something that had happened in that, and not confused, but like a sense of wonderment of how are they doing this. And so this is easily one of my favorite films of the last few years. And it's just so beautiful to look at. And it was a bit of a nice coming out party for Dev Patel, where I think a lot of people knew he was a great actor, but it took something like this for people to truly appreciate him.
Yeah, and it's also him establishing himself as somebody who's not going to be limited to the roles we expect him to play as a Southeast Asian actor.
Hmm.
Because something like The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel is playing more into what the film industry might expect of him. Although to work with those actors, I would happily indulge in a stereotype too. The Green Knight is great. I've always meant to rewatch that. I was very surprised at how much I liked it because I didn't know what I was going to get when I sat down to watch it, and it is really great. I love the Last Temptation of Christ ending. I was really surprised at how much that affected me.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And it's also got some of the best sound design I've ever heard,
yeah,
specifically of the Green Knight himself. Every time he moves, he just creaks like an old tree, and it's
yeah,
beautiful to listen to.
absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so our next category is going to be live performance. And so this is, it could be either like a musical documentary of like an artist performing, it could be a stand up. If you have some other way that you want to interpret this, then definitely open to that, whether it's like a live recording of some sort. I'm definitely interested to sort of hear what you interpret it as live performance.
Well, it would definitely in any other capacity have to include Madonna's Truth or Dare, but we've really poured over that one already when you graciously had me on your Pride episode some time
Hmm.
ago. So there's no need to talk about that one again. So my runner up, I'm going to say, is I'm the One That I Want, Margaret Cho's first film of I guess it was her first major tour as a comedian, and that was her coming back from obscurity after this really difficult entrance into major show business. She had been a very successful stand-up comedian from when she was a teenager, and then she got a network television show that was going to be the first Asian American show, and then it ended and went down in flames, and she suffered a great deal for it, and then came back with this one woman show that she turned it into, that she filmed, I should say. And I think it was like the first movie to make $1 million by while only playing on like 10 screens in North America. It was like everyone who had it in their town ran to see it, and it's so great. There's a lot of great stand-up comedy movies, but that one's particularly my favorite because I remember the day we went and saw it and how many times we watched it after, and I memorized all her jokes and all that stuff. And she's made good films of her show since, but that's the classic. But my number one is the 1984 Jonathan Demme film of the Talking Heads, Stop Making Sense, which is promoting their 1983 album, whose name I can't remember. For many, it's the greatest concert film of all time. I mean, I don't want to, I would never say that with authority about any film, but I can certainly understand why, in terms of the way it captures the performance and the energy, and does it with very little flourish. I mean, it really just feels bare bones, even though there is a great deal of thought placed into how he is shooting every number, how he's cutting every number. But they restored it recently, and they played it on the big screen. And a friend of mine and we went to see it, and we just had a really great time. I've always liked the Talking Heads, but I've never been a devoted listener of theirs. So a lot of it was even new music to me, and I still had a really good time watching this film.
Yeah, that's a great pick. I have not seen the Margaret Cho special that you're talking about. And I've
Hmm.
got a question. How do you differentiate between a stand-up special and a stand-up movie? Is the distinction just that it gets played in movie theaters, or is
Yes.
there
Yeah,
something
it's
else?
I
Okay.
just look on IMDb to see what its distribution history is to the best of
Okay.
their reporting. But yeah, and in this case, it is a movie that I saw in a movie theater, so that I do know that it was distributed that way. Yeah.
That's fair.
But it is your
Yeah,
show. If you pick up stand-up special, I'm not gonna get mad at you. So
especially nowadays where it's so blurred between what is a TV show and what is a movie and things like
yeah.
that with the rise of streaming, it's all very nebulous
You
now.
could also talk about feature length too, because her movie is I think it's a good 90 minutes, if not more, while as a lot of these Netflix specials are shorter.
Yeah,
So
I usually tap out at about 60 minutes.
yeah, I think the performer probably had a longer show. I think they cut him down, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I wondered if I should pick a stand-up special. I couldn't think of one that really stood out enough to me to qualify, so I did not. I went with two music performances. I wanted to include The Last Waltz, but that made my my musical pick for the last time we did best
Oh, okay.
top films by genre.
Yeah, I struggle to think about including that one too because that's also up there for me.
Now, I look forward to you either outright making fun of me or just, maybe laughing under your breath with my first pick.
It's gonna happen anyway, so it doesn't matter what you pick. But go ahead. Yeah.
That is my runner-up is Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I've sort of liked her music, but then I watched this documentary when it came out last year, and I was really impressed with the quality of showmanship and utilizing the arena space to its maximum potential, because as anyone knows, going to an arena show can sometimes be hit or miss when you're seeing a concert where if the band doesn't fully utilize the space, it just kind of sounds echoey and awful. And then, there's only so much fire and pyro and stuff like that you can do before you kind of get bored. And I was so impressed with the stage design and the way that she was using screens to accentuate her performances. And on top of that, the fact that she was literally performing songs from every album that she's ever put out is quite an impressive feat, and one that someone with her catalog is not an easy thing to pull off.
Did you see it live or you saw it the film only?
No, I just saw the film. I would
Okay.
actually go and see her live. Like I would totally pay good money to see this. The problem is good money is a couple grand at this point.
Yeah, the appeal of Taylor Swift does not elude me. I've listened to her whole catalog because I was curious last year because I'd never really listened to her before, and there are some good songs in there. The obsession with her kind of eludes me, but that's also because I'm not 13, so that's fine. The kids can love whatever they want to love. And also, I value my life too much to say anything on the internet bad about her. But I would see her concert if someone had tickets and said, "Hey, come with me." I would go. And the same with the movie too. Did you see the movie because you have a Swiftie in your life, or you were just curious to see it?
I was just curious,
Okay.
and also my wife has become a bit of a Swiftie. I think
Oh,
she's
okay.
gonna, if she listens.
No,
to
but
this,
that makes sense. And my
hearing
niece
that.
was into her. I would have taken her to see it, but it came out around the time that I had Oscar movies to catch up on, and I was like, I'm not saying that I would never see this, but this is not going to be a priority for me.
Yeah, I did not watch it in theaters. I did watch it on Disney Plus.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then my number one pick, I declined to say much about your pick because we've got an identical number one pick with Stop Making Sense.
Wow, is that the first time that ever happened?
It might be. I think we've had some overlap between our runners up and things like that, but it might be the first time our actual pick lines up.
And I've seen a movie you've actually seen. This is a miraculous day. Yeah.
But like you said, there are so few films that could be categorized as the best of their genre, and Stop Making Sense is within that Mount Rushmore, regardless of sort of your opinions on the Talking Heads. I've always been a pretty big fan of their music. They're probably the band that, like, I would love to call them my favorite band, but I don't listen to them enough or know their deep cuts enough to be able to, say that proudly, be like, oh,
yeah, I
Talking
feel
Heads are my
pretty
favorite
much the
band.
same. I always thought that they were good. I always liked him on his own too. I just never, after I saw that movie, I went and did a deep dive of their whole discography as well, which was like the first time I'd ever done that. So,
Yeah. I had never seen this movie before. I specifically was also sort of waiting to see this until it came to theaters, and I was so happy that it got redistributed last year by A24, and so I went and saw it in theaters, and it was phenomenal. I was blown away by the quality of this film.
Yeah, Jonathan Demme was a magnificent filmmaker, and he had a particular touch he loved making music documentaries. He made many of them, and he had a particular knack for the way that he captured live performances. Yeah.
And I almost considered putting American Utopia as my runner-up as well, but I decided not to go back-to-back David Byrne movies because that was also a stunning musical documentary directed by Spike Lee, of all people, too.
Oh, I haven't seen that one yet.
It's really good. I think it's also on Disney Plus.
Okay.
And it mixes his solo career with Talking Head stuff, but with a really great backing band. So it's much more about him being a member of a troupe than, specifically him being the star of the show.
Right.
Okay, let's move on to our next category, and that is silent. And I
Ooh.
know in the past I got some flack for including documentary and animated, specifically from the Classic Movies Live guys who decided to do an entire podcast naming their best animated films by genre. But I know silent is a medium and not a genre, but
Oh, okay.
I don't care.
You've got those kind of friends, do you?
I do, yes. Enough to make an entire podcast about it.
I mean,
um,
it's a fair criticism, but at the same time, when you think about yourself sitting down to watch something, this is a way in which you categorize things in terms of choosing what to watch. Silent
yes, I do.
is a choice that someone makes, so
Yes.
yeah.
So that said, what are your picks for your favorite silent films?
Oh right. Well, my runner. I mean, there's so many. This is actually this is a hard one to do because I have had the pleasure of really boning up on my knowledge of silent film in the last 10 or so years. 10, 15 years, which I never did. When I first became interested in movies in my teen years, I didn't watch them a lot. And I think I talked about this before. A lot of it having to do with the fact that technology has allowed them to be presented in the proper way in the last however many years and restored as well, which was an option that I was aware of when I was younger. Anyway, my runner up would have to be the first Alfred Hitchcock movie that really makes him Alfred Hitchcock, which is 1927's The Lodger, starring the very handsome Ivor Novello. This is I've seen this a few times now, and I had also had the pleasure of seeing this on the big screen. It's a gorgeous film. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it highly. I'm currently reading Donald Spado's, or Spoto, I don't know how you say it, his biography of Alfred Hitchcock, and I'm actually reading a chapter, watching the film, and then reading the next chapter. So I've been going through his filmography in detail, and that includes finding some of the obscure silent stuff that's a lot of it's on YouTube, and this is definitely the best of that crop. But my number one choice is probably not a very creative one, but you can't love movies without loving Chaplin. He is the greatest. He gave us the foundation of a great deal of what movies became after him. And my absolute favorite of his films would have to be 1931's City Lights. This is, of course, him working in the silent medium well after sound has been introduced in Hollywood. But it's something that he was so masterful at. He doesn't take on sound until kind of in modern times, and then fully in The Great Dictator. But City Lights, for me, is his best combination of drop dead hilarity and deeply moving pathos. I find the ending incredible in how moving it is. It makes me cry every time. And Emma Stone recently made it one of her 4 favorites on Letterboxd, so I'm in good company.
You're in good company with me as well because those are both excellent choices. I'm a huge Chaplin fan as well, and it would be hard to narrow down just to one of his films, but I
Mm-hmm.
know City Lights is probably one of his most impressive ones. I have a hard time even saying that because they're all so good.
Yeah,
But
they are.
that's a
Although City
fantastic
Lights is
choice.
easily chosen for me as the best. I don't know why. It's the one
Yeah.
I really have a particular knack for that one. But I love the Gold Rush. I love the kid. He's great.
Hmm. And then I love your choice of The Lodger as well. It's a movie I've only seen once. I do need to rewatch it, but very similar to you, my wife had read that Donald Spoto book as well,
Oh, great.
and since she's read it, as we watch Hitchcock movies, she goes back and rereads that section of the book, and
Oh,
then so she's trying to highlight everything in the book as we watch it. So we're doing a real deep dive over the past few years of trying to watch Hitchcock, where I'm up to I think 31 of his films I've seen now,
oh, great.
and I'm still got halfway to go.
Yeah, I think I've seen them all. Maybe I'm missing one or two, but I'm pretty sure I've seen them all of the ones that exist. I mean, there are a couple of
Yeah.
lost films in there, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so my runner-up is going to be The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, the
Hmm.
German impressionist film. This originally made my best films by through the decades list, so I can't make it my top one. But it's a stunning horror film and one that you can watch and immediately see its influences that are still going on today in the way that it's depicting liminal spaces and costume design and makeup and all that sort of stuff. It's an absolutely fantastic film and a pretty easy one to watch. It's only an hour and 16 minutes, so it's definitely worth watching. And then my actual pick is, people are usually a Charlie Chaplin guy or a Buster
Hmm.
Keaton guy, and I consider myself both. But my pick is a Keaton one, and I'm going with the General, which I
Oh,
believe was the first Keaton film that I saw, and just I couldn't believe that I was laughing the whole way through the way I was laughing at this film. And then the way it ends with this giant bridge collapse where this train falls into the river. You watch it and you're just blown away by how they managed to do this. And you realize, no, they just straight up bought a train to specifically, crash into the
hmm.
river. And that's like some real Christopher Nolan shit that's going on.
Yeah.
And Keaton was doing it 100 years ago.
Yeah, he's incredible. That was one that I was debating about as my runner-up over The Lodger, because that is a classic. I regret that I have not seen more of his features, but I have seen that one and a few others. But The General is, even if I end up seeing everything he's ever done, I'm sure The General will still end up being the best one. I think it's so good. It's so funny. And as you say, it is impressive. I mean, the stunt work that he pulls off in that one is sort of, if someone asked you what is Buster Keaton about, that would be a great movie to show them, to really encapsulate the nature of his fame and his expertise.
Yeah, and I know the politics of the movie are a little bit messy, but after reading a Keaton biography, it sort of seemed that like he didn't care about politics at all
Right.
and how he was perceived for the most part. His sole focus was coming up with a entertaining story and incorporating death-defying stunt work in
Well,
it.
because he's a Confederate soldier in it. Is that what it is? I haven't seen it in
Yeah.
a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a Confederate soldier, and it's about the Confederates defeating the Union soldiers and all that
Right.
sort of stuff.
Right. Right. Right.
So like obviously even at the time, I think it was a bit of a messy film considering, but I think he truly did not care about that stuff.
Yeah, and also something I was talking about with a friend of mine recently, which is this very interesting aspect of Hollywood, particularly back in the day, of appealing to Southern viewers. And with things like Gone with the Wind is the most obvious example, or Song of the South. Movies that talk about the good old days of when the South was great, being made by people in the North. Like being made by the victors of that Civil War, and it's just really interesting that this idea of nostalgia being expressed through missing the good old South is a really obviously problematic but fascinating for me in aspect of the business of selling films. And it probably had a lot to do with the fact that there was more poverty in the South, and therefore more people going to the movies in that part of
Hmm.
it was a strong box office intake in that part of the country, and that's why. But you have studios making, especially as the studio system really comes into swing much later after the General, you have a much stronger effort being made to keep Southern viewers on their side, like cutting Lena Horne's scenes out of her movies and stuff like that, which is,
Yeah,
yeah,
which is a
interesting.
whole different aspect of
Yeah.
Hollywood history that's very shameful.
Yeah, and what people don't realize is that there was a strong response to this. I mean, the NAACP was robust enough in 1911 or 1914 to be responding to the birth of a nation.
Yeah.
So yeah, but anyway, I'm sorry for the tangent, but it's just something
No.
that had come up in conversation recently.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, well, what is your favorite sports films there, Bill?
My runner-up is the brilliant documentary Tokyo Olympiad by Kon Ichikawa. This is his documentary of the 1964 Tokyo Games, Summer Games. Um, a lot of people don't realize that a film has been made of just about every Olympics, particularly before the home video days. They were made in many cases for a feature film exhibition, not always feature length. And this is the most prominent and the best of them. Criterion not long ago did, I think they put out a box set of like every Olympic film ever made.
They did,
And
yes.
I think it's like $200 or something. So congrats to the three people who bought it. And then they put them all on the channel, but none of them were available in Canada. It was the US only, which was terrific because you would click on that image, excited, and then nothing would come up,
Hmm.
because I would love to see them. But I have a feeling they're not all made by artists, as this one was. But it is fascinating the different ways in which he films the different games. And most impressive, or most notable for me when I'm watching it, is watching all these people perform in arenas where there's not an ad anywhere, which is fascinating. But that is my runner-up, so I don't want to linger on it too much. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's incredible. And watch all Ichikawa because he's incredible. My number one sports film as a raging homosexual, of course, has to be the 1992 comedy A League of Their Own, starring Gina Davis, Tom Hanks, and my junior high best friend, Madonna. This is a movie that I have seen so many times. I can recite every single line. I know every bit of this movie off by heart. It still thoroughly delights me. It and Jaws are my favorite summer movies that I try to watch every summer. And a lot of Gina Davis says that a lot of men will come up to her and whisper, "Yours is my favorite baseball movie of all time," or like my favorite sports movie of all time. And she's like, "Why are you whispering?" And then, of course, that's why she had to start an entire institute to look into why it is men have to tell her this in secret. But all fun stuff aside, it is a great baseball movie. Penny Marshall didn't want to double anyone. She made everyone who auditioned for that movie had to audition on the baseball field before they could audition as an actor, because she knew she wasn't going to have stunt doubles for all of them. And so she very frequently is filming real baseball games. She would actually have the gals go out and play actual baseball games and not tell them when she was shooting them, as a way to, build up footage for the movie. So I think it's a really great, I think it's just a really great film. It's so much fun. And it's also about an important piece of history that we have recorded on film. And I always love World War II movies. I've talked about this before, but I feel a particular affinity to them, as if I had been there, which I hadn't. But my dad grew up in that war, and that's probably why.
Well, we're about to talk about war films in a little bit, so I'm curious
Yeah.
to hear your thoughts on that genre then. But yeah, League of Their Own is fantastic. Like, it's a hilarious movie. The baseball is excellent in it. The performances and story are all really solid. It's got a stacked cast. Like, that's an excellent pick, so no shade to that one at all.
Great.
I would proudly tell Gina Davis that it's one of the best baseball movies ever.
So would I, but she would expect it from me. Yeah.
And then in regards to the Tokyo Olympiad, I've always wanted to watch these Olympic films because it was Criterion that sort of caught my eye about them, where I'd heard about some of them in the past but didn't really know much about it. And then when they put out the box set, I was like, wow, I'd love to have that, but I cannot justify that price on watching it maybe once.
If that, I mean, I'd make my way through the whole thing once, and it's like, now what do I do with this? That's a gift what you buy your spouse when you're trying to save your marriage. That's the only way you can justify spending that kind of money.
Yeah. But talking about other artists, making Olympic films, would you not consider someone like Leni Riefenstahl an artist?
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, was she a great filmmaker? I don't know that I've ever actually sat through an entire Leni Riefenstahl feature. And as someone pointed out, Leni Riefenstahl is great in montages only, like when you see clips, because of the way that she filmed everything. And I know that we're not living in a time where form is separated from content. So, you have to be careful how you talk about her, because even though she was never a member of the Nazi party and insisted that she didn't espouse their beliefs, she was happy to be their favorite, and was really quite selfishly apolitical. And that's almost as bad, if not as bad. So the bits I've seen of her Olympiad film are impressive, but I've never actually watched the whole thing. So I don't really know. Yeah,
that's fair. So my runner-up is Moneyball, which was also in my 30 films in 30 years list. So I will not repeat that one. That is my favorite baseball film. That's also my favorite book of all time too, which I know is a bit of an odd choice, but I love that book and I love that movie.
Your wife need not worry about what you do at night. You are straight. If he's walking through the park in the middle of the night, I promise you he's just trying to get somewhere. That's the only reason.
And my actual pick is He Got Game. I've already mentioned Spike Lee once, but this is his basketball film with Denzel Washington and Ray Allen. And I remember when it came out, and it didn't seem to make a ton of news at the time. Maybe I was too young to really notice, and it doesn't really get talked about a bunch nowadays, both in Spike Lee's canon and in the sports canon. And I think it's, near the top of both for my money. I was absolutely blown away. Denzel Washington can basically do no wrong in terms of when he's on his A game there, and having an actual active basketball player at the time, Ray Allen, playing a basketball prodigy, was a bit of a risky move because you have no idea whether or not he can act, and he really sells this story of a young man who is about to decide where to go to college, and the prison warden lets Denzel Washington out of prison so that way they can convince him to go to the prison warden's alma mater.
Mm.
It sounds a bit complicated with the way I'm saying it, but it all makes sense when you're watching it. And it's, how is this kid going to make the biggest choice of his life so far? Is he going to help his father out, or is he going to be his own man? And it is such a compelling story. And then there's a final one-on-one basketball sequence where he is going to decide what college he's going to go to based on how the game turns out is incredibly gripping.
I was not expecting this choice at all, and I have not seen this movie in a very long time, but I do remember liking it. It's Rosario Dawson is in it as well. Am I remembering
She
that
is, and
correctly?
Mila
Yeah.
Jovovich as
Oh,
well.
right. Yeah, Spike Lee is just great. And one of the things I love about Spike Lee, and this sounds like a veiled, backhanded compliment, and I really don't mean it, is that he is so quote unquote outspoken. His movies they're just, people are just shouting their feelings and talking about it like it is in his movies. And that is one of their most refreshing qualities. And there are times when the storytelling is a bit flawed, and I don't mind because the voice is so vibrant, and that
Hmm.
is the case of this movie for me, which is that and it's been a long time, but I do remember not thinking it was like the best movie, but I really loved how bold it was and how in your face it was and all that stuff. And that's usually what I like about his movies, even when I don't think that even when they're not up to the quality of like Do the Right Thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll never be able to accuse Spike Lee of not having a point to make in his films.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Because I like Summer of Sam for that reason too, even though that's also a very flawed movie. But I don't know. I just like the volume at which he does things is something that I really enjoy from him.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one that we are going to go to is Thriller, which, maybe we've sort of treaded similar territory with horror or crime or things like
Hmm.
that. So it'll be a little bit interesting to sort of see how you navigate your picks here.
Yeah. Someone once said, and I've probably mentioned it on the show. Someone once said the difference between thriller and horror is thrillers are good chasing evil, and horrors are evil chasing good.
Mm,
And that what makes Silence of the Lambs so revolutionary is that both happen in that film.
yeah.
But again, people can decide for themselves. Don't write me emails correcting me. I don't care. Uh, and actually, I think that my choice of a runner-up is not an example of what I just said, but it would be Don't Look Now by Nicholas Roeg, starring the recently late great Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie. This is a movie that I love being scared in movies. It's not something I have a problem with. I know this is something you're very sensitive about, and I'll make fun of you for it for the rest of your life because you don't like scary movies. I love scary movies, but it's rare that they really scare me. And this is one of those few movies where I was watching it and things in it made my blood actually go cold. And what's fascinating is that I don't really know why. I mean, like it's just a couple dealing with grief, and then they go to Venice, and then creepy things happen, and that's basically the story. But it's an expert example of editing as storytelling, and it's so good. My number one, though, is my number one Audrey Hepburn movie, one of my top 10 films of all time, which is Charade from 1963 by Stanley Donen, which maybe it scared me at one point. I don't know. I've seen it 800 zillion times, so there's not many surprises left, but I still enjoy watching it every time. It's funny, it's colorful, the script is so clever. One of the few times that the mysterious hidden secret was one that I really did not guess before the ending, and it fooled my sister. And she's a proud film spoiler. She always knows. She always guesses ahead of time, and that one actually got her. So that's an impressive accomplishment on that part. But I think it's a brilliant screenplay, and it's such a rich and enjoyable film.
I don't know how anyone would ever be scared of Charade. It's such a silly movie at times.
I don't know that part where he nails her. That's terrible. That part where he corners her in the phone booth and is flicking those matches at her. I don't know that I've seen that
Oh,
make some
yeah.
audiences pretty tense. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It's been a while since I've seen that
And she
one, so
is
I
being
forgot about that
chased by
part.
men who want to kill her. It is a thriller, even if it doesn't give you those
Yes.
kinds of thrills.
No, no,
Yeah.
I think it's a very valid
How
pick.
dare you? I'm just kidding. Ah,
I have not seen
click.
Don't Look
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
as no surprise there. I've slowly, been trying to shed my aversion to horror, and I hope to eventually no longer have that title bestowed upon me.
Mhm.
But that is one I do eventually want to watch.
Have you seen any Nicholas Rogue? I think he would be right up
I
your
have
alley.
not. No.
Oh, yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think that's something you would definitely, based on whatever I've put together of your film taste over the years of listening to you, I think you would definitely enjoy him. And Walkabout and Don't Look Now are my favorites. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was like, because he also did The Man Who Fell to Earth, right?
Yeah, I've never liked that movie as much as
No.
people do.
Okay.
I found that movie a bit tiresome, but it's been a long time. I don't know, maybe I could rewatch it. And I'm not a huge fan of Bad Timing either. Eureka's really good. Of course, The Witches is wonderful. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I will have to do a Roeg deep dive, I guess,
Mhm.
one of these
Mhm.
days.
Yeah.
So my runner-up is Zodiac, the Fincher film. I previously included that in my 30 films in 30 years list, so I will not repeat that as my top pick. But probably it's tied for my favorite Fincher along with The Social Network. I think this is probably a more impressive film in terms of uh, what the scope is dealing with here, and some truly, shaking to your core moment of terror. But for the most part, this is a procedural film, one that I really do love. But my top pick is a movie that I just watched last year. With the passing of William Friedkin, I decided to watch a couple of his films, and To Live and Die in L.A. is now one of my all-time favorite films. It is
Oh.
a very grimy. This might be more action than thriller, but I don't really care. I want to include it. It's such a grimy police procedural where a Secret Service agent is trying to track down a money counterfeiter with a very young Willem Dafoe as the villain here. And there are some fantastic chase sequences, fight scenes, tension throughout the whole film. William Peterson is one of those guys where, like, every once in a while he pops up in something, and like, how is this guy not the biggest star in the 80s and 90s? And I don't know if he just had a bad agent or what, but he seemed to constantly be shooting himself in the foot with the types of roles that he would pick, or maybe it was his ego or something like that. But I absolutely love this film.
I don't know for a fact, but if I were to guess, I think William Peterson just isn't the right kind of cool to be a movie star. There's something about him when you think about Tom Cruise being a star in the 80s, William Peterson has
Yeah.
a bit too much of a dad vibe even when he's young to be that kind of star, even though he was also really talented.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's definitely someone that always looked 50 even when he was 20.
And looked like reliable. You know what I mean? Like stardom usually involves contradictory qualities, like you're kind of normal looking and then you have the streak of wildness to you, and he doesn't really have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like he really pulled off the leather jacket and the tight dad jeans in this movie.
Well, I'm gonna blow your mind because I have never seen this film. So yeah,
I made a pick Bill hasn't
I know
seen.
It's happened. It's finally happened. The day is here. Yeah.
Well, I would love it if you ever check it out for you to tell me what you think
I
about
will.
it.
Yeah, it is something that I've been meaning to watch because I have a good friend of mine who's been talking about it because he's a huge Friedkin fan and he even met him and got a photo with him and all that stuff. So
Oh,
yeah, so he was also recommending it. So I would like to see it.
that's exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, we teased it a little bit earlier, but our next category is best war film,
Hmm.
and someone who believes that they are from World War II. Bill, what are your picks?
Apropos, that is one of my choices. But my runner-up is not. It is Luis Puenzo's The Official Story from 1985. This is one of my all-time favorite films of all time. Probably in my, I think where I recently did my top 100, and I think it's somewhere in the top 20 or 25. It's certainly my favorite Argentinian movie of all time. It is Norma Aleandro as a history professor who has an adopted daughter and begins to realize that her child may have not been adopted um, legitimately, but may have been taken from one of the many university students murdered under the military regime in what is often referred to as Argentina's Dirty War. This is the best political thriller ever made. Just a flawless film. And I'm going to count it as a war movie, even though it doesn't have battle sequences. My number one is a little bit more conventional. I actually really love war movies. It's a real guy genre that I have no trouble getting into. But my favorite, not my favorite, well, yeah, my favorite for the purposes of the show would have to be Anthony Minghela's Oscar-winning The English Patient from 1996, a film I've seen many, many, many times. And as a very famous Seinfeld episode has made quite popular as an opinion for many, it's a very overdrawn, boring film. I think it's glorious. I think it's passionate and romantic, but at the same time has a great deal of respect for the price of war, in this particular case, the price of World War II. And also, one thing I like about it, it's not a movie where war is on and then war is off. It's about the dirty lines between those two things. The fact that in the beginning, the young soldier played by Canadian Toronto actress Lisa Repo Martel is blown up on a tank, even though it's like they're on their way to victory to celebrate the end of the war, but there's still landmines everywhere because it's not like someone cleaned this stuff up before, everyone celebrated. So that sort of thing I really like about it. It's a brilliant film. It's a brilliant adaptation of a really, really good book, but a very different one. You can hear me talk about the adaptation of book to film on the podcast Getting Lit with Linda, where I mention many times that I got an A+ on an essay I wrote about the adaptation from book to film of The English Patient.
Very nice. This is a movie that I agree with the Seinfeld opinion. I do not care for it.
Then watch it again. Don't you love those people? When you say, like something, you're like, oh no, now I'm going to tell you how you should have watched it and why you should like it.
Yeah, it is a beautiful film to look at, and I do think there are some wonderful performances in it. I just found myself bored through most of it, unfortunately.
Oh, that's a shame. Yeah. No, yeah. I really
and I had never heard of the official story before, so that one sounds very interesting.
Oh, yeah, you got to do it.
Yeah. Okay, so my war films, the first one, my runner-up, is going to be Dunkirk, the Christopher Nolan film. I really liked the use of using 3 different timelines and how they all converge towards each other, about this story about rescuing British soldiers on the island of Dunkirk. I don't know what the actual location is supposed to be called.
It's a coastal... Is it a town? It's on the coast anyway. And the reason why the British soldiers are stuck there is because they basically have their back to the sea.
Yes, yeah. And so we got the 3 different stories of, being on land, being on water, and being in the air, and sort of how they all connect with this, ticking time clock as the backdrop of the score. Works very nicely as well, and a very moving moment from everyone's current favorite icon, Barry Keoghan, as well, which I'm sure you have thoughts on him, don't you, Bill?
Did I mention it in the show? We did a show on Saltburn, and I probably talked about it. I think he's really good. I mean, there's sort of, because of his recent success, and particularly that film, he's being sort of packaged for me as this atypical sex symbol, and I don't get it, but hey, I'm not a 19-year-old girl, even though I am one on the inside. And so I don't really get that, but he's great. I forgot that he was even in that movie because that's before he was sort of on my radar, but yeah.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And my actual pick is I'm going twice with David Lean in this episode, and The Bridge on the River Kwai.
Yeah, again, straight. Yeah.
Yeah, this might be the most dad movie on this list.
It's my dad came back to life when you mentioned it, is what just happened. Like, it's such a dad movie.
It is, but I also really enjoy it. It's about a group of British POWs who are forced to build a bridge for their Japanese captors, and they have a decision to make of, do they give it their all because that is what they are trained to do, and out of respect for themselves, do they build the best damn bridge that can be built, or do they intentionally sabotage it? And while they're doing this, you also have a storyline of William Holden's character, who is an American Army, or I think it's actually supposed to be Canadian, maybe. I can't remember. It's been a little while since I've seen it. One of the characters I know is Canadian, who is plotting to destroy the bridge, blow it up. And so you've got this great contradictory storyline of going between building the best thing you can and how to destroy the enemy and things like that in this battle that they don't know that they're actually facing because they're on the same side. So it's a really great film, a lot of fun, some really strong performances. You can't go wrong with Alec Guinness, in my opinion.
Yeah, and a wonderful example of a really subtle performance winning an Academy Award too. Like he doesn't have any, big speeches. He doesn't have any Al Pacino moments, and he won a Best Actor Oscar, which is really incredible.
Hmm.
That is a film. It's a really good film, and uh, David Lean probably has the highest ratio of films that are like hit out of the park of any director. He's made so many movies, and so many of them are good. I've only maybe disliked one of them, two. I don't dislike The Bridge on the River Kwai. I think it's a really good movie. I just haven't found my way in with it, and I find I'm very passionate about a lot of his movies. They really grab me, and this is a movie that I admire, but for some reason I haven't quite figured out where I connect with it. And I don't know why, because I love war. This is one of my closet heterosexual qualities. I love war movies. And I often like the big long epics that everyone else thinks are boring, the Oscar winning type of movies. I usually like those a lot more than people. I haven't really landed on this one for some reason, and I've seen it twice, so I don't know. Maybe a third time's the charm.
Yeah, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe. I don't know. Okay, so we are now at our final category, and that
Wow.
is Western.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, what are your picks for best Western
Well,
film,
this is my
Phil?
other closet heterosexual quality, is that I love westerns, and I love a good western. I just watched one the other day that didn't end up on my list, but could easily, which is Anthony Mann's The Tin Star, starring Anthony Perkins. But my runner-up is another Anthony Mann film that I love. Probably it's for a lot of people. They talk about Johnny Guitar as this kind of drag queen western, but one that I like even more is Anthony Mann's The Furies, starring Barbara Stanwyck. Because what's better than a western where she flings a pair of scissors at a woman and scars her for life? This is also, I believe, the last film starring Walter Houston before he died. If not the last, it's like the last year before he died. And Barbara Stanwyck is the daughter of this hard-bitten rancher played by Walter Houston, and she has the audacity to fall in love with his enemy or the son of his enemy. And then she ends up taking over, and Judith Anderson, who is most famous as Mrs. Danvers in Rebecca, comes to live with them as a sort of stepmother, and she does not take to it nicely. It's a great example of Barbara Stanwyck's power as a indomitable star, and it's not a very well known film. I never heard of it until Criterion put it out, but I love it. But that's not my number one. My number one has to be Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West. Of course, Sergio Leone is one of the premier spaghetti western filmmakers. But he didn't want to get stuck in that genre after he made the Clint Eastwood trilogy. He wanted to make Once Upon a Time in America, but he couldn't raise the funding, so he decided to make this film instead, where Claudia Cardinale plays a woman who comes to this frontier town to marry a man that she has sort of been mail order bride connected to, but finds that he and his family have been murdered and sets about to find out who did it and get revenge. It could also have been my choice for epic film as well. It's one of those movies, and I'm sure everyone has their examples of this. Every once in a while, you have the great fortune to watch a movie where you can tell from the opening shot that you're watching something great. It doesn't happen often. It might have only happened as much as I can count on one hand in my life, where just I mean, I remember feeling that way about LA Confidential from like the opening credits, where you can just tell you're in for something that is smooth and perfectly assembled, where every shot is exactly where it should be and everything about it just gleams. And this is one of them.
I love when you have that experience where it just something starts up and you goes, "This was made for me
Yeah.
specifically."
I do love it too when I'm watching a movie that like starts out good, and it's not until I'm in really deep into it that I'm like, "Oh my god, this is a masterpiece." Because that happens too. And that is a really cool
Hmm.
experience, but it is really impressive to me when a movie starts out brilliant and stays brilliant, because of course we've all seen movies that we're like super into, and then I don't know, they don't stick the landing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel with westerns as a whole, they might have. the biggest discrepancy between great films and mediocre films
Hmm.
of almost any genre. And almost all the ones I've watched, I truly do love, because I think when a Western is done correctly, it just hits all those spots that you want from a movie. And I unfortunately haven't seen either of your picks, but
Oh.
I am familiar with both of them and want to watch both of them.
I mean, don't forget, it was
That's
like
the
the most
case.
popular genre for decades too, which is why there
It
are so many
was, yes.
mediocre ones, because it was, you know, one that everyone and their dog was doing a version of, and became elevated as sort of a respectable genre with John Ford's
Yeah.
Stagecoach in 1939. But before that, there were millions of them being made. The ones in the 50s are interesting because you have a lot of Red Scare era criticism of American hypocrisy being written into the stories, that I find
Hmm.
fascinating. That are kind of hidden by the fact that they always end with justice winning out, but the criticisms along the way are quite notable. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of both neo westerns
Hmm.
and anti westerns and revisionist
Yeah, of
westerns.
course.
I think I think those are some of the best takes on the genre, because you get everything you want out of it, but then you also get a really insightful take of what the director is wanting to say.
Yeah.
Okay, so my picks, my runner up is going to be the classic John Ford one, which you could probably name half a dozen right
Hmm.
now. But I'm going with The
Of
Searchers,
course.
which much like The General, the politics of this movie is very messy, but the scale, scope, intensity, and performances of this movie are something to absolutely behold. And the fact that now that anytime you see a shot of someone standing in the doorway where the
Oh, right.
inside is dark and outside is light, it's directly referencing
Right.
this film.
Yeah.
It's become such a staple.
It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I don't remember finding the politics of the film messy. Probably, I wonder if it just hasn't aged well because it's just not how we talk about those things anymore. Because
Yeah, I think
it implies criticism of the fact that because he plans to kill his niece when he finds her because she's quote unquote gone native or whatever. Um,
yes, yeah. So that would be it. Would
yeah,
be the sort of the depiction of Native people in the way it's talked about. And while I
of
think
course, and it's like
John
white
Ford
people
and
in makeup, right? Yeah,
yeah, and the fact that I feel like John Ford and John Wayne, their politics may not have been identical, but they worked well enough together. And I think John Ford is trying to say one thing with this movie,
yeah.
and John Wayne is trying to say a different thing with this movie.
Yeah, I think though, considering that John Wayne was considered this unimpeachable icon of American masculinity, the fact that he's making this movie where it's not outright stated, but it's insinuated that he's wrong for wanting
Hmm.
to kill her is, again, not a strong enough statement in the way we talk about these things now, but is certainly notable for its time. I mean, this is the
Yes.
film that people always use as their example of John Ford's questioning the values and politics of American westerns. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But my actual pick is going to be Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid,
Oh,
the George Roy Hill
yeah.
film.
I haven't seen this in
Which
decades, but yeah, go on.
this is also a movie where maybe a little questionable whether or not it's a western. I know it's set within this era, but it doesn't have the same sort of cowboy feel to it as other westerns
Hmm.
do. But it definitely fits within the milieu of that. But really, it's the fact that you've got Redford and Newman as such incredible chemistry
Hmm.
together that you can't help but be on the same wavelength that they
Yeah,
are.
and a very beautiful Catherine Ross as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, I have to rewatch this movie because it's been so long that I'm pretty sure that watching it now it'll be like watching it for the first time because it's been so long. But this is Redford at the height of his beauty, and I don't know that I don't think it's questionable that it's a western. I think it's outright a western. I think it's questionable how how much of a period piece it is because even though it's set in whatever time it's set, everyone looks like a shaggy haired hippie in it. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that is true. I think the one part of this movie that gives me pause is the raindrops keeps falling on my
Right.
head
Yeah.
sequence,
Yeah. Not a lot
which
of westerns
really
with
feels out
Burt
of place.
Bacharach classics breaking them up. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but still, regardless, this is a fantastic film, a lot of
Yeah.
fun. If you've never seen it before, it is so enjoyable to
Yeah. A
watch.
lot of great George Roy Hill movies. Yeah.
Hmm. And I know a lot of people aren't as big of a fan of their follow up film, The Sting, that they did together. But I'm a big fan of that one. I really like
I
still.
like it too. I think it's a really good movie. It's a light movie, and when you look back and you look at the impact that The Exorcist has had on culture since then, it's amazing. It does feel like the Academy just didn't want to pick that darker movie for Best Picture, and they went with a lighter choice. But it is a good film.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so those were our picks for the best films by genre part 2. I had a lot of fun picking all these out. I hope you had a lot of fun too,
I
Bill.
did. There's nothing I love more than waking up extra early to pour over spreadsheets. So no, I'm just kidding. I did have fun choosing these. I always have fun being on your show. I always appreciate you remembering to have me on. So thank you for that. And I hope that you have the best birthday ever.
Thank you. Yes. By the time this comes out, my birthday had already passed. I'm recording it
Yeah.
before, but for those who wish to know, I am doing a road trip down to San Francisco. I'm gonna
Oh,
drive down.
that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you been
I'm
there
gonna
before?
go watch some baseball. No,
Oh,
never.
that's exciting. You
Yeah.
have to go scope out all the Vertigo locations.
I'm very excited for
Yeah.
that. My wife, not so much. That's the one Hitchcock that she does not
Yeah.
like.
Well, that's her day to go shopping.
Bill, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you? What are you working on? Please share all that great stuff.
Sure, yeah. You can find me on the socials at my name, just at Bil Antoniou. You can listen to my podcast, Bad Gay Movies, Bitchy Gay Men. I write a monthly column for thatshelf.com. I have an article coming out soon, probably will be out by the time this episode airs, on the 1999 Cannes Film Festival. And that is also partly in promotion of an upcoming project I have, which is that my very dear friend Gregory Roseborough, who has been on BGM many times, he and I we've started a new podcast that will launch later on this summer, which is called Riviera Rats. You are the first to find out about this in the public sphere. Which is us going through every year of the Cannes Film Festival, episode by episode, talking about Palme d'Or winners and whether or not we agree with the choices. So that'll be premiering later on this summer.
I am very excited. I did not know about this. This is fantastic.
Yeah, I've kept it under wraps, but we've got a lot. We've recorded some episodes. We're about to record our intro episode. We're waiting for some artwork to come in. We've got our theme music, so everything is basically almost ready to be assembled and released, at which point we will put it out. And so far we've got a really great thing going. So I hope people will subscribe and I hope people will enjoy.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll make sure to share that when it comes out, and hopefully we can time it where you can come back on the show and also promote
Absolutely.
it too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And what you have coming up on BGM? I'm an episode behind. I just watched I listened to the Borrowed episode, but I have not listened to the one on Our Sons. But what do you have coming up?
Yes. What do I have coming up? Oh, the great Mark Cirillo, who has starred in many a BGM. He very graciously returned to be on the show again to talk about a film that he is in called The Last Straight Man, I think is what it's called. It's been a while.
My life story.
Oh, please. In BC, there's no way you're the last one. That's where I go when I need a break. No, so he'll be on our next episode, and then after that, my good friend Marco Timpano, who is also a podcaster of the Insomnia Project, he will be on to talk about My Big Gay Italian Wedding, which is actually the name of a real film, if you can believe it or not.
Wow. Yeah.
Yep.
Is a great
It
title.
sure is. Yep.
All right. Well, I'm very excited to listen to those, and I will make sure to include links to find all of that in the show notes.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Of course. This has been a That Shelf podcast. Visit thatshelf.com for more great film discourse. Follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads at ContraZoomPod. What are your favorite films of the genres that we mentioned? Send an email to ContraZoomPod@gmail.com. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there as well. And if you really like the show, consider tipping us on coffee. Thanks for checking us out.